Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Nun Tes. Begin on the bottom line on the Daf Nun Ches Mebeis. Our Gemara continues a Megadic conversation regarding really halachic, but in the sense of we spoke about this Perek Hazav, we were talking about Oina, because we're talking about regarding Kinyanim of the pricing and in the acquisition and how you can acquire something. We spoke about Oina as Mammon, which is the overpricing or underpricing and unfair monetary treatment. Then we said in our previous Mishnah, just like there's Oina b'mekach, so too there's Oina also b'dvarim. There's also with one's words, and it's forbidden to hurt someone to unfair treatment in regards to emotional things. And the Gemara continues on that theme in today's daf. The entire world, and we should have a good night. So we discussed in today's daf our malpim, as we spoke about the problem about whitening, embarrassing a person in public, unfair treatment regarding with words. The famous quote, even though the gates of prayer have been closed, the gates of tears are never closed. A famous story with an oven that there was machlekes regarding the laws of its tahara or state of tumah, and which opened up for the Torah try being rayas that the halachas like him, which is a case of chatz chulios, when if you cut the oven, which is like a pot essentially, into strips, and I put sand between each part, is that considered susceptible to tumah or not? And the Gemara concludes with a noise dvarim as it applies to the ger, which has more than one lav attached to it. So we get the daf nun ches amid beis. The bottom line, we had said we were speaking about this idea about the severity of malbim nechavei barabim. We said kol malbim nechavei barabim, whoever whitens a person and his face by embarrassing him, as if he spilled his blood as he drains from his face. And we said, we said whoever goes down to Gehenna will eventually come out, except for three who go down and don't come out. And one of them is Hamalbim B'nei Biram. On that theme continues the Gemara, Amar Rabba Chon Amar Yechon, as Getin Tabab Testament Aleph. Noich Loila Adam. It's easier for a person, meaning it would be preferable in a way for the person Sheyavei Al Safek Eishasish, which that he should have relations with a possible married woman, and not to embarrass someone in public. No, where do we know this from? The Darish Rava expound. It wasn't in the pasuk in Tehillim. The David HaMelech says uvitzali, which literally means to say when I am limping, but it means because of my wife, that initially David HaMelech says I sinned with her, because we know that a wife is called tzali, as the pasuk says in the beginning of the Torah, v'yivenes atzela. Hashem built the tzela, whatever that means, the side of Adam into a woman. So uvitzali, with my wife, samchu, they rejoiced, v'nesfu, and they gathered around, kahu, they tore at, v'loy damu, so literally means and they weren't silenced, but in this context it means if they would have torn my flesh open, they wouldn't have found any blood, because all the blood was drained, what they said regarding me and my wife. So what's that referring to? So I'm a double of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. David HaMelech said of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the world. It's revealed and known in front of you. Had they torn open my flesh, my blood would not have dripped down to the ground, meaning they had already drained all the blood from him by embarrassing him and shaming David HaMelech. And not only that, even at the time, like Taisa explains, not only when they're sitting around in the corners, they have nothing better to do, and they're sitting around, they're talking Lashon Hara. No, even when they're engaged in the most severe halachas, and they're not even talking about the context of Eishes Ish, of a married woman, they're not even handling the Isser of Eishes Ish. Only they tell me, David, Abal Eishes Ish, if someone has relations with a married woman, what's his death penalty? Because they're alluding to him, which is the story that happened with David HaMelech and his wife, that it wasn't clear. Shtais discusses what is a suffocation, but the point is that his wife was not possibly his wife, because she was really married to someone else. So they were trying to hint to him, like, David, what type of death penalty does such a person have? And David Melech says, and I say to them, yeah, his death penalty is strangulation, but he has a portion in the world to come, as we said from Tais in the previous daf. Although that we say abolish ish, we say that ultimately the person has a chelik haba. If someone embarrasses his friend's face in public, does not have a portion in the world to come. So David HaMelech was basically saying, better the story of David and Bathsheba than what was by them. Because by David was a suffocation, because if someone goes out by Melchemes based David, they would write a get for their wife on condition that if they die, they should be divorced from right now and they shouldn't require any yibum. Now, all those days when her husband was out at war, when David HaMelech had relations with her, she was maybe Mugareshes. If he would die, she was Mugareshes from the beginning, which that's what ended up happening. And if not, then she wasn't divorced. So it was like a suffocation ish. And still David HaMelech is saying, you guys who are embarrassing me for what I did with this suffocation ish, which was my wife, Betzali, and that B'lei Damu, and that now you guys embarrassed me, I didn't have any blood, you guys are worse. Continues the Gemara, some say it was Rav Chana bar Bizna, Rav Shimon Chasida, some say it was Rav Yechon ben Yechai. It would be easier, a person should rather throw himself in the fiery furnace and not shame the face of his friend in public. What do we know that's from? Mitamar, the Tirchsiv in the biblical narrative, it says in the Torah, he mutzes. She was pregnant, so she was being taken out. So even though she was being taken out to be burnt, she didn't say it was Yehuda that himself who had be with me. Rather, what did she do? She sent to her father-in-law, to whomever these items belong, that's who I'm pregnant from. And if he's going to admit from himself, let him admit. Which Taisa actually brings, the Girsa he mutzes is without an aleph. Like it says a pasuk in Eicha, "Vayotzes eish betzion." So it means that she was already close to the fires. She was like literally right by the fire, and she didn't send to her father-in-law, but just her emes. If he wouldn't admit, she wouldn't have publicized it. So you see, rather throw yourself into a fiery furnace than shame another person. Another teaching, Rav Chana. No, that's what Taisus brings. I don't know, but I think our Torah has with an aleph, right? But Taisus in the different maschil, and Taisus says that without an aleph, or maybe that's how it's read. But like upon them, that's saying that even though the fire is already ungezündet, and still it's you don't embarrass another person. Another teaching, Amar Rav Chanana Berei de Ravidi, says, "It wasn't in the pasuk in Yikra, that a person should not hurt his fellow," which the word amisai could be read am itoi. Amisai could be read am itoi, the nation that's with him. So that means am she'itcha b'toicha v'mitzvahs al teneu. The people that are with you, he keeps Torah mitzvahs. That's who there's a problem about Ainah. But a person who doesn't, you don't have the Isser of Ainah. Amar Rav says, L'oilam yehi adam zar ba'ainas ish. The person should always be careful not to hurt his wife's feelings. Meaning, with the words that he uses, he shouldn't pain her. Why? Why more than anyone else? Because her tears are common, are frequent, and therefore the punishment for inasa is also kraiva. The punishment for hurting her with words is also swift to come. So because she's quick to get emotional and get hurt, one should be more careful not to hurt his wife with hurtful words. Similarly, Amar Rabbi Elazar said, when the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the gates of prayer have been closed. Somebody says the pasuk in Eicha, Gam ki ezak v'ashabeya. Even though I scream and I shout, Shasam tfilasim, my prayer has been closed up. Even though the gates of prayer have been closed, the gates of tears have not been closed. It says the pasuk in Tilim, Shema tfilasi Hashem. Hear my prayer, Hashem. So it's using a terminology of bakasha that is asking from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the shahir is tefillah, and Vishavasi Hazina, and my scream, listen to. But then that's regarding his tefillah, he says, listen. But then El Dimasi, he says, Al Techerash. To my tears, don't be silent. So it's changing from the Lashon of Bakasha, of a request, and saying, oh, this I'm confident, that here you're not going to be silent, as Taisus brings, that it doesn't say, Shama El Bichi, listen to my tears, or Ra Dimasi, see my tears. It says, Al Techerash, don't be silent. In other words, I'm confident you're not going to be silent because Shari Demoyes are not Ninalo.
And Barzel, Shai Barzel, what was the answer over there? It was that Shai Barzel, Pinas.
Oh, you're talking about like Mechitza Shabarzel. That is
But there's an answer over there. It's not really permanently closed. That?
Trying to recall. But Al Kapanim, but regarding tefillah, if a person's crying, his tefillahs, it sounds like, are going to be heard. Now, Bava Rav, he says, now, this interesting that the Gemara is just contrasting over here, that although a person has to be careful not to hurt his wife's feelings, but it sounds like the Gemara is saying, but don't think everything your wife says you have to listen to, even though you're afraid she's going to get emotional. Whoever goes after his wife's counsel, he falls into Gehenna. Like it says, but there wasn't as a person as wicked as Achav, etc. Which the end of the pasuk says, that his wife Izebel seduced him and incited him to do this. So it sounds like that the Gemara is trying to say, although you have to be careful not to hurt her, especially with words, but it doesn't mean that whatever she says, that if he should do, and he falls in Gehenna if he follows after Atzas Ishtay. Now the Gemara says, really? What? Yeah. Now the Gemara actually asked. The Gemara says only if Papa Labai says, but don't people say Itzach Gutza? If you have a short wife, Gachin v'tilchashla, bend down and listen to what she has to say. So how are you saying that if you follow what your wife says, you fall into Gehenna? Says it's not a difficulty. It depends for what. When it comes to things in general, then you shouldn't be listening to your wife. You be the man of the house. But when it comes to running the house, then you bend down and you listen. She says, do this, do that in the house. Then you listen. Or another version, when it comes to spiritual matters, that the husband, he's in charge. If you follow what your wife says, you're going to end up in Gehenna. But in general things regarding we were going for Shabbos and vacation, whatever, there's all these different things. So then you listen, you bend down and you listen to what your wife has to tell you. Now, going back to what we said before, Amar Rav Chizde says, all the gates of prayer, Ninalim, have been closed. Except for someone that screams out because of someone who had said hurtful words to him. The gates of that person are not closed. Shlomo says a pasuk in Amos. Hina Hashem nitzav. While Hashem is standing al choimas anoch on a wall that was made with a plumb line, which means that it is very straight. Uviyad anoch, and in his hand is the plumb line. Now, but obviously the words over here are anoch, are oino. So Hashem is there when it's someone that is was nisana, was hurt with words. Hashem is right there listening to whatever the person has to say. Amr Belaza, which obviously don't squander that, people get upset and they want to get revenge or whatever, saying Hashem is right there hearing all your praise. Amr Belaza says Hakol, on all sins, nifra b'dei shliach, the person gets punished through an emissary, through an intermediary. Except for someone who says hurtful words. Shlomo says the pasuk uvayadoi anoch, in his hand, in the hand of the Rebbeinu Shalom was this hurtful word, and he doesn't give that over to a shliach. Hashem himself takes responsibility for someone saying hurtful words. Amar Bavo says Gimel ina pargid, for three individuals, the partition that separates between the Shechina and the heavenly hosts, the wall is not ninul b'fneim, is not locked in front of them to diminish their visual from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, Hashem always sees them until He punishes them. What are the three sins that Hashem is constantly looking to punish them? Aina, someone who says hurtful words. Begazel, stealing, robbing. Bava Zara, and for idolatry. As the Gemara brings the source, no, which sounds like that it's always by Hashem. He's always using it in his hand. Is this of a person who said I know, who says hurtful words? Gezel d'chsev regarding robbery, it says a pasuk in Yomei chamas v'shoid for theft and spoils of what they had taken. Yishama ba'al panai tamid should be heard regarding it on my face constantly, meaning in front of me. There's no partition between Hashem and the sin. And the pasuk in Yeshaya, the people that anger me on my face constantly. So you see that it's always in front of Hashem. These three types of sins. Now, Amar Rabbi Hudi says, talking about this idea about the relationship between husband and wife. A person should always be careful with the grain in his house to make sure he has food in the cupboard, not be like old Mrs. Hubbard, have in the pantry some type of food. Why? Because strife and disputes is not found in the person's house, only because of the issue about food. Somebody says a pasuk in Tehillim, Hasam gevulach shalom. We say this every morning in the Pesukah de Zimra. Hasam gevulach shalom. He places your boundary with peace. When is gevulach shalom? That is when chaylev chitim yasbiech. The fat of wheat, he satiated you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you have food in the house, then people are happy. When there's no food, then the fights start. Amar Papa says, this is what people say, Kimishlam Sare Mikada. When the barley has been finished from the jug, which is where they keep the barley, Nakish v'asi tigra bevesa. So then the merchant, which is the merchant of strife, starts knocking and coming. Or it means that the jug is knocking, meaning like a empty vessel that you hear the echo when you bang on it. Hello, hello, hello. There's empty because there's nothing inside over there. That's when the fight starts because there's no food in the house. Papa says, a person should always be careful with the grain that he has in his house because because the Jewish people are not called poor, only because I'm not having the food in their house. So it says the pasuk in Shleiftim, and it was they planted, etc. And it says in the pasuk after that, that the Midyanim laid on them a siege, and it says, etc., which is they destroyed the grain of the ground. What does say after that? The Jewish people became very poor because of Midian. And so we see that when it's that there was no grain, then they're called Vayidal, then they're called Dalam, they're called poor. Continuing with what we said before regarding the relationship between husband and wife, how you have to treat your wife with kid gloves because their tears come quickly. It says, a person should always be careful in the honor, the dignity of his wife. Because blessing is not found in a man's house, only because of his wife. So if a person wants bracha, he should be honoring his wife. Somebody said the pasuk in Bereshis, and to Avram they did good because of her. So to see the goodness that Avram Binu got was because of his wife. This is what Rava said to the people of Mechaiza, where the city where Rava dwelled inside of was called Mechaiza. He would tell them, honor your wives, so that you should become wealthy. You want bracha? Honor your wife, and then you'll become wealthy. Now, the Gemara introduces a teaching that's going to relate back to what we were speaking about before. It's not Hassam. We learned over there in the Mishnah Masechtas Kelim that says Chatchu Chulyos, that the oven was made into strips, and then they connected it in a furnace, the way an earthenware vessel is made. And then they went and they attached these strips, they put sand between the strips of this oven. So it's a machlekes in the Mishnah Masechtas Kelim. Rabbi Elazar Matar says this is not a klicheres. It's just rather like a way you have a dungware or earthware, which are not makabel tumah, because as Taisa says that if there wouldn't have been sand between them, Rabbi Elazar would have agreed that it's a kli chashav because the whatever it is that you have that smears it around makes it into an oven. It's just because the sand is what's keeping it together, and sand is something that's not makabel tumah. So therefore, he held that this oven is tar. Chachamim say no, it's tameh because you go based on the strips, which, as Rashi explains, all their ovens were made like these large pots with the opening on the top, and they heated up in the furnace like other pots, like movable items. It's just that they would position it on the ground or on the board. They would connect with the clay all around to make it thick until it holds and it contains the heat. So that's this machlekes regarding, the fact that there's sand connecting it would make it that it's tar, or would you say no? We look at it as the strips because its main components are cheres and therefore it's makabel tama. Now, as a getin tamid beis, v'zehu tanur shel achnai. This is what's called the oven of achnai, which Rashi says that means a snake, because a snake generally goes and he puts his tail into his mouth and he surrounds something like that. So something about my achnai. Why do they call this oven achnai? So Rabbi Shloimy says because shekifu dvarim ka'achnazu, because they surrounded Rabbi Elazar with words and proofs to show that it's really makabel tama, like the snake who surrounds and puts the tail in its mouth. But tamu, and therefore they said that this oven is actually tameh. It's makabel tama. So that day, Heisha Rabbi Elazar called Shuvash Ba'olam. Rabbi Elazar tried giving all types of responses to argue back, to bring a raya that it's tar. But they didn't accept his proofs from him. So Amlahem, there's a famous Gemara that he said, Im halacha kamaisi, if the halacha is like me, chorav zeh yechiach. Let this carob tree prove. So neker chorav memkoyim mei amma. The carob tree got uprooted from its place 100 amas. Some say 400 amas. They said to him, we don't bring proofs from a carob tree. He went and said to them, like me, let the stream of water prove that I'm right. So the stream of water started going back the other way, going the back way, the water stream. They said to him, we don't make proof from a stream of water. So again he said to him, like me, let the walls of the study hall prove it. So he took Kaisle Beis HaMedrash Lipol. So the walls of the Beis HaMedrash started to tilt, to fall in. So Rabbi Shur got angry, so to speak, at the walls. He said to the walls of Beis HaMedrash, if the Talmudic students are fighting one with the other in halacha, what good do you guys have over here getting involved and collapsing on us? So the walls didn't fall because of the honor of Rabbi Shua, who was saying that they have no right to get involved. But they didn't erect themselves, who said that they should prove that he's right and they should collapse. And the walls are still tilted, the leaning tower of the Beis Medrash walls, that where it didn't want to get involved, but it already was, so it stayed as it is. Now, so Rabbi Elazar went back and said to them, if halacha is like me, from heaven they should prove it. Heavenly voice came out and said, what are you guys doing fighting with Rabbi Elazar? Halacha is like him in all places. Rabbi Shua got up on his feet and he said a pasuk in the bottom, it's not in heaven. Says what does it mean that Torah is not in heaven? The Torah was already given at Har Sinai, and therefore we don't pay attention with the heavenly voice. Har Sinai, but Torah, it already says in Har Sinai in the Torah, you go after the majority to tilt the halachas. Even though from heaven they're screaming halachas like you, we don't care, we don't pay attention. We are the majority, and we are saying that this oven is tameh, not like you says tar. Now Taisus asked in the Masla B'Shamayim, he says, but don't we know the Gemara in Yavamis that says halachas like Beis Hillel because a Baskol came out and said halachas like Beis Hillel? Says Taisus, here it's different, because here Rabbi Elazar was coming to be chaylik on what the Torah says. The Torah says acharem lahatas. So you can't go against what, even though from Shemaim they're screaming halachas like you, the Torah itself says that we go after the majority. But over there, to the contrary, Beis Hill was actually the majority. The only reason why we weren't sure was because we thought that maybe Beis Shammai, who were more sharp, maybe would say like Beis Shammai. That we're saying no, halacha is like Beis Hill, which acharam lahatas. Moreover, that here the baska was only coming out for the coveter of Elazar, that he said min nishmam yechichu. Over there, it was unprovoked, so therefore we'll go with the baska. I says Taisis, either Gemara over there says Rabbi Shua is the one who says imashkich bevaskal, but we don't find that he says that. We only find it over here, like the story of Elazar, where because he was only doing it for the coveter of Elazar. So how could the Gemara over there prove that it's going like Rabbi Shua? Says Taisis, yeah, because once we say Torah lo b'shamayim he, and so then it would sound like in all places imashkich bevaskal that we wouldn't pay attention, even for Beis Hill. That's why the Gemara says that according to Rabbi Shua, you wouldn't necessarily go based on the baskal. But Al Kapan says the Gemara further, Ashkechei Reb Nosson Eliyahu. Reb Nosson encountered Eliyahu Hanavi. Amalei said to him, "My Avakuch Brichu Shaita. What is the Kadosh Baruch Hu doing? What was he doing at this time when the Rabbi Shua and the Chacham were saying we don't care about that the Baskal is saying Allah is like Elazar?" Amalei says, "Kachayich va'amar." Hashem was laughing, so to speak, and he was saying, "Natzchuni b'ni, my sons, my children have prevailed over me," meaning they won me, because although I'm saying halach is like Elazar, they control the Torah now, because lo b'shamayim, they say no, that's not the halacha. I says Tyson the Mascot Chayach. I think Gemara says Navay Dezar from the day the Beis Mikdash was destroyed. Ain't tzchok l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't laugh. Here he got a kick out of it that they're winning him, that they're saying that halacha is that it's tummy. So Tyson, that's kavua. He doesn't have like, he's not always laughing. Here it's a milsa d'bechusa ba'alma udama. It's like, it's like, even a very serious Rosh Hashiva once in a while will snicker, it's like, good kazak, doesn't laugh, but that was like lahavdil kiviyachol, what was Kadosh Baruch Hu was kachayach, and said natzchune b'nei natzchune. Now Amr, they said Oisayim that day heviu kol tahara shatir Elazar. All the taharas, meaning there was something that happened that they asked this shaila in the Beis Medrash, because there was tumah that fell into the earspace of this oven. So Rabbi Elazar had paskin, it's not a klicheres, and you could do taharas. And Rabbi Elazar said it's okay. But then the Chacham said, no, you're wrong. This is a klicheres. And they brought all the things that Rabbi Elazar had allowed them to use in that oven. And Vasar from Beish, they burnt it in fire. The Nimnu love, and they made a count, and Uberchu, and they actually put him, it's a euphemism, but they put Rabbi Elazar in Chayrim, because he was fighting against the sages. Now, Allah is like the right. So, Bama, they said, "Mi yelech v'yediu." Who's going to go and notify Rabbi Elazar that he's in Chayrim, that he's excommunicated? Alam Rekiva says, "Ani yelech, I'm going to go." Why would he go? Shemi yelech adam she'ina hagen v'yediu. Maybe someone who's not professional enough is going to go and notify him. The whole world's going to be destroyed. I mean, you have to be very delicate. You have to be a diplomat to know how to say things that are very, disturbing a report. So, Master Rabbi Kiva, what did Rabbi Kiva do? Lavash Chayrim, he put on black clothing, and the Satav Chayrim, and he cloaked himself with black clothing, which that's the idea of like tsar and avelis of mourning. And then, B'yashim Lefanav, he sat himself in front of Rabbi Elazar, Berichuk Arba Amas, 4 Amas away. So Amalei Rabbi Elazar, Akiva, Ma'yem Yamayim, what's going on? What's Manishtana Hayom Hazem Ekalayamim? What's going on? Why are you different than all the different days? Amalei said to him, Rabbi, my teacher, Kamadumali, it appears to me that your friends are staying away from you. Again, he's hinting to him this idea in Chayrim, which people have to stay away from you. So Afu Kara Begadav, so Elazar also tore his garment, because a manuda, a guy in Chayrim, it has to tear his garment. The Chalatz Min Allah, they took off his shoes, because a person in Chayrim is forbidden to wear shoes, as the Gemara says, Ma'id Kod Daf Tetzvav Mabez, which Taisa says, it's actually a discussion in the Gemara Ma'id Kod, and it says it's not a raya if a manuda has to tear his garments and take off his shoes. Maybe here he did it only for Tsar Ba'alma, like pained that he's in Chayrim. I believe that as a may, Benishmet, and then he slipped off from his chair. And he sat on the ground. Zolgu in of demois, and his eyes were flowing tears. So what happened was, as we said, that he had to be careful how to tell it to him because the world's going to get a punishment. So he did it very delicately. So only loka oilam shlish bezeisim. The world was punished. A third of the zaysim were ruined. A third of the olives. Shlish pechitim, a third of wheat. Shlish pesayim, and a third of the barley crop. Some say that af betzek shebedei isha tafach. Even the dough that was in a woman's hand got ruined. Tana, we learned the Bible says ach gadol, a huge makkah. Hayyibosayim was that day. Shebachal makom shenosim ba'enav Rebbe Elazar nisraf. Any place Rebbe Elazar looked at got burnt. Now, Rabbi Gamliel also was coming on a boat, which Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and this whole story obviously was done with the stempel, the approval of the Nasi, of the leader of the Jewish people, and he was coming on the boat. So Amar Lav Nachshla Tavai, a wave came to capsize the boat. Amar said to Gamliel, it appears to me this must be because of Rebbe Elazar ben Horkenes, because again they put him in chayim and he's getting punished for that. So Amar Raglav Amar, he stood up on his feet and he said, Master of the world, go live do it's revealed and known in front of you. He said, I did not do this for my own honor. Base Abbas, he said, I didn't do it for the honor of my father's household. Only for your honor. That it shouldn't be an increase of fights in the Jewish people, because he didn't want that an individual person, no matter how great he is, should disagree with the majority. So the sea calmed down from its storm. Now, related, however, says the Gemara, Ima Shalom, that was her name, Ima Shalom, was the base of Rebbe Elazar. She was the wife of Rebbe Elazar, but was Achsed Gamliel Hava. She was the sister of Rebbe Gamliel. So again, the story is with Rebbe Elazar and Gamliel. Rebbe Elazar was put in chayim, and Rebbe Gamliel was the Nasi that he was supposed to get punished because Rebbe Elazar was hurt. So Mahum Ma'asav Elif, from that story onward, she didn't let her husband Rebbe Elazar do Nefilas Apayim. You see how great is Tachnan over here. Nefilas Apayim, how people don't like. I mean, there's Armin Hagim and Klai, so not on Pashte regarding Tachnan, but you see from over here how great is Nefilas Apayim. But she didn't let her husband say Nefilas Apayim. Now, there was one day that was Rish Chodesh. The wife mixed up, she thought it was a Chodesh Chaser, meaning that it was going to be Rish Chodesh on day 30. And that he's not going to do Nefilas Apayim because it's Rish Chodesh. Truth is, it was Malay. So Rish Chodesh was only going to be on day 31. So on day 30, she wasn't careful with her husband to, usually someone has to jump in and say, Kaddish, Sometimes you don't have to because Mavaisach, it's Rish Chodesh. So she wasn't there to jump in and say, Kaddish. So Ikad Army, there are those that say, Asa Anya B'koy Abava. What happened was at that moment that he finished Moin Esrei, there was a poor person by the doorway, and I picked a Leirifta. The wife went to go give bread to the poor person. She comes back, she sees him saying Tachnan, falling on his face. Amalei, she said to him, Kum, get up. Ketila Sa'achi, you killed my brother. Adahachi Nafik Shipura Mibesham Gamliel Deshachat. And in the meantime, the trumpets came out from the house of Gamliel that he passed away. Amalah, so he said to his wife, Manal Yadis, how do you know that your brother was killed? Amalei, she said to him, Kach Mekablani Mibes Avi Abba. This is the tradition I have from my father's household, which Rashi says from the household of David HaMelech, who was the father of the family because she was the daughter of Nesiim. She was the sister of Gamliel, which is from the Davidic dynasty. Or Taisa says possibly it means to say from Gamliel, meaning from the immediate family. With what?
Relatives from the mouth, they saw that the dead. I heard this.
Chashmanom?
I heard this. You said this shiur told them from David.
Not from David HaMelech.
All right.
Right. So she says, I have this tradition from my from my father's household, kol ha'sha'arim ninalim. All the gates are closed, chutz mishar einah, except for the gates of einah's devarim, of hurtful words, because like Rashi says, what happens then? Tsar halevhu. It's the pain of the heart. V'karv l'hayr demayis, and it's very close to bringing down a person's tears, and therefore it's great consequences. And that is why I knew when you're going to fall and sing the Filas Apayim, and you're going to pour out your tears when you're saying Tachten, that's going to cause a punishment, and that's why her brother died. I told him I learned the Braisa. Which one was the wrong thing? Oh, what they put in Mechayim?
Yeah, was it wrong that he put him in Chayim?
No, Lav Davka. It's the Obesafaya. Azam Mezuktis, you know? It says Mekin Fabrent werden, even if it's the right thing, you know, that's you have to understand what that means, but it's have a big gehalten, like they say. So talking about in the Bryce, Hama'anis Hager, if someone hurts a ger with a Noah's Devarim, he taunts a convert, and he violates 3 negative prohibitions. Whoever presses regarding monetary ideas, then he violates 2 negative prohibitions. Says Ma'ana, why? Why is that Ma'ana different? It says 3 lavin. It says V'ger lo'isayna, v'chiyager itcha gar be'artzchem lo'isayna oisay, and so lo'isayna ishas amisay. So even though that's amisay, but V'ger b'chal amisayhu, he's a regular Jew. But lo'ichat namish lo'ishak, then to do it monetarily should also be 3, because it says v'lo'isilchatzeno, V'ger lo'isilchatz, and v'lo'isi lo'ikanoisha. You shouldn't be to him like a collector, which is to press a person, pushing him to collect the debt, and V'ger b'chlalhu is also included. So says you're right. Both. Someone hurts monetarily or emotionally to a ger, it's going to be 3 negative prohibitions in the Torah. The Torah learned the Brayshah. It says, why did the Torah warn in 36 places? Some say he was actually a member of Mekaymis, 46 places. Beger. So Torah says, what is it, 36 or 46? So Torah says, some say it's 46 because it counts like when it says Kiger Meyisim Be'eretz Mitzrayim. Like whenever it references that, like you should understand what it means to be a ger, that's counted as another place. But even that as a may, it says so many times in the Torah. Why? So it says the Gemara, because the Yetzer Hara of a ger, that's his malach. I mean, that's his like Lord is bad, because he was a non-Jew at one point, and you have to be more careful for that reason with the convert. It says, what does it mean in the pasuk that the convert you shouldn't oppress or press because you were converts in the land of you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. So it's in the learned. Rabbi Nosnami says, Mum shabach, blemish in you. It's a well-known phrase. Don't say to your friend, meaning you were ger, you were foreigners. So it's a disgrace for you to mention that now there's a foreigner to the Jewish people, a ger. Right now, this is what people say. If someone has someone in his family that's hanging, he shouldn't tell his friend, his servant or his family member, he shouldn't say, Zikeif Benisa, go hang this fish for me. Because anytime you mention the word hanging, it's a disgrace for you because you have a family member who's hanging. So don't mention anything with hanging. The same thing is that you are a ger in Mitzrayim. So don't tell someone, oh, he's a ger, like as if like a fremda is a foreigner, like he's a greener. You know, you are greener also in Mitzrayim. So therefore, mum shabach al tam l'chavach, anytime. Those things.